Okay, so at this point, we have applied all the color from the swatches onto all our flat layers already. And honestly, I'm quite liking the direction it's going. And some of you might even think, okay, it looks pretty done. Like maybe that's the flat comic style you're going for, and that's totally fine. I think knowing when to stop is always a difficult question. And it sort of changes as you get more experience. You have a better understanding and grasp of it. But at this point, I feel like going with your gut is probably the best thing. And if you feel like your art piece has already, achieved the goals that you had in mind, then feel free to stop anytime. But for me, I feel like this piece has the potential to get even better, especially keeping in mind the brain feeling that I want to convey. I feel like it's still a little bit stiff. So I'm going to keep going. So as I'm looking at this piece right now, I think what stands out to me the first is the skin color. I feel like it's just a little bit too white, and because the color I picked from the swatch has this like light blue tint, it makes her feel a little bit zombie-ish, and that's going against that warm feeling that I have. At this point, like we can create secondary color by using the color from the swatches. So I'm gonna go into the women layer and then find her skin, which is this layer. I'm gonna duplicate this layer by pressing Command J, and then you see a layer here, or you can use this to duplicate a layer. I just like to use a short key because it's much faster. So now we have a new layer of the same thing. Again, we locked it. And I was thinking maybe adding some of the pink will help. So this layer, I'm gonna make it into the pink layer. Let's fill it. This is the layer. So now I have this top layer of the skin. Now the skin has two layers, being pink, but then it's merging too much with the background. So I can always adjust opacity, maybe like 50. To let the bottom layer show through. So now by visually having two layers on top of each other and then the top layer semi-transparent, I'm creating a new color. So after the skin is done, now my eyes really got drawn to the bird because the bird seems pretty high contrast as well, and I want to tone that down. So I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna duplicate this one layer lock it. I kind of want to keep the like mid-ground color relationship in the greens. So I'm gonna use the green here onto this duplicated layer. And then do the same thing, adjust the opacity. So now I feel like the bird is much more pushed back in space. So then our lady can come forward. All this little flying leaves, we haven't changed the color, so it's still white, and it's really popping forward because of the high contrast. So let's go ahead and also give it some color and push her back. Maybe give it yellow right now. So as you can see, this way we can create new colors from the original colors of the swatches by blending them visually and changing the opacity. So at this point, I'm pretty happy with the main colors that I put in with all the elements. The image is definitely getting softer and towards like where I want it to be. But one thing really jumped out to me is actually the line now. Like we have to remember the line is also part of the image, and the line color is also part of the color system here. And the black line just started to feel a little too harsh. Again, that's more of a stylistic choice. Like generally, I like something a little more painterly in the outcome rather than something that's maybe more graphic. So let's go ahead. I think, for example, with this one, let's find the hair layer. Okay, so it's always good to double check that's the layer you want. Even just by, again, blending it with opacity, like softening it, like maybe a 40 or 45%, it's already, I feel like, a better than just a black. And then with the body line, That's another thing. Like I like to, because this piece I work digitally, and I knew that I want to change the color of the line eventually. So I kind of work on the lines on separate layers, so it's easy for me to change the color that way. But if you work traditional with your line scanned in, you can always still separate your lines like the way you separate the flats. So let's give that arm a pink color. And now I feel like we're kind of losing a little bit of her lips because it's become the same color of the cavity inside her mouth. So I'm gonna pick up this color that I just created by turning down the black opacity of the hairline. So now there's a new color, and I'm gonna use that for the outline for her mouth. And then you can keep doing this for the other part of the image until you get to the point that you feel like everything feels nice and soft in this case, or whatever you're trying to achieve with your piece. As you can see here, I have changed all the colors of my line at this point. And to me, I think the color can still use a bit more depth. And I think I'm gonna introduce a light source to really help with that atmospheric perspective. So I think I love to use gradient a lot. I forgot who mentioned this, but they're saying gradient essentially is the passage of time, which I think is quite romantic because like if you look in our nature, the time we see gradient is usually like sunrise or sunset with very dramatic change of time. So I think with this piece, the light source is gonna come down from up here, and that will be really nice because she's looking up here, and this can create like a focus with the light and her direction of looking. And usually with light, we think of like yellow light as more of the sun and more warmth, like bluish light, more like electronic, more artificial, or like really morning, sort of a cool light. In this case, I think it's definitely more of a warm light situation. So I'm gonna have a new layer, and then I'm gonna grab my gradient tool here. And I think I'm gonna use this yellow. So right now, pretty much I'm still using the color we already have. We can always tweak those colors later as we go. And the offset, I feel like that just give, so much depth to the piece. Like the air all of a sudden on top feels lighter. There's a direction. And talk about color consistency. Now I feel like the hair is not reflecting this surrounding anymore. So I'm gonna do a layer duplicate like we just did. And then also introduce the same yellow light. But now I'm actually picking up this new yellow light, which was blended from the pink and the earlier yellow from the dress for this one. And then fill her hair and then add a layer mask. I love doing layer mask because that way you can control the layer, change the layer without actually altering anything. Like for example, I'm gonna have a gradient, but then I can turn off this layer mask and it's still, an intact layer. So you can always kind of like go back if you don't like what you did, and it's non-destructive, which is really great. I like the gradient, but I feel that maybe it's a little bit strong, so I'm gonna adjust the layer opacity to come down a little bit. Around there. Then I'm gonna do the same with the tree. Duplicate the layer, and then apply the same yellow. Do the layer mask. Have the gradients. So in layer mask, it works as black being the negative, white being the positive. So now I'm having a gradient of black up, meaning like these parts are being erased. So showing the layer underneath it right here. So now I'm visually blending color that way. And then I'm also gonna turn down that opacity a little bit so it's not to lose that green too much into the background. So I'm liking the direction and where we're going. I think the big shapes are in good place. So it's time to kind of get into the secondary shape and really enrich the image and add some complexity and interest to it.